What's up, friends? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Thanks for joining me today. I just want to take a really quick second to thank all of you for joining me. For those of you who have been here for a while and have been listening day after day, I so appreciate your loyalty and being part of the Pack a Day podcast family. Appreciate you a ton, so thank you for doing that. And for those of you who are joining for the first time, hope you enjoy it. We're going to talk some Packers football. I'm going to be talking Tuesday's practice and a few other topics that are very noteworthy from these past couple days. So let's jump in and get started right away. But thanks so much for being here. The biggest thing that we need to talk about right away with Tuesday's practice is Matt LaFleur decided to make it a little bit shorter. It was about an hour and a half practice. And maybe more importantly, Aaron Rodgers gets the day off from practice. So that was noteworthy to begin with. And maybe most importantly, because it's not like the offense has exactly been clicking on all cylinders. In fact, the defense has been dominating pretty much day after day after day, series after series. The defense has owned the offense ever since day one of training camp. So having Aaron Rodgers be out of practice is not exactly what the doctor ordered. And as you might have imagined, the defense was on one once again and was completely dominant against the offense. A huge reason for that was my three players of the day, all at edge rusher, including Rashawn Gary, Jonathan Garvin, and Preston Smith. I thought Gary and Preston set the tone early. We talked about Jair yesterday setting the tone. I thought today it was, or on Tuesday, it was Gary and Preston, specifically Rashawn Gary. He came right away. There was a play early in practice where he was going against a double team, and it was Yash, and then it was Aaron Jones coming on a chip. And he just powered through and just dominated both players. Comes through and pressures Jordan Love on the play. And you could tell Jordan Love, like, he gets the ball, he comes up, he looks right, he looks left. And you could almost like feel the shock and panic with how quickly Rashawn Gary was in the backfield and in Jordan Love's lap. So much so that like Love just sort of like got rid of panic, get rid of the ball and threw it out of bounds. Like, he had no idea that Gary was going to get there that quick, and understandably so, because he's thinking, going through everything in his mind, right? He's thinking, all right, we've got a double team on Gary on the backside. My first initial read is to the right, and then I'll work back left. And he looks right, and his guy's covered, and then he looks back left, and Rashawn Gary's in his face. So, like, you're expecting that to be like, all right, we got a double team over there. We're going to be good to go. When you're facing Rashawn Gary, don't be so sure, because he will dominate any double team at any given moment if need be. So he was on one once again. He had another pressure. He had a great play where he set the edge. Like, he just set the tone early and often. And it had actually been a quiet few days for Rashawn Gary by his standards, but he picked up right where he started at the beginning of training camp and was his dominant self once again. He also combined with Preston Smith on a play, on a stunt, which was gorgeous, and Gary went to the outside and Preston looped back in, and everyone, of course, is just laser focused on trying to stop Rashawn Gary, so Preston comes clean at the quarterback. That was an impressive play. Preston had a couple other plays, and then Jonathan Garvin. Well, let's talk about Jonathan Garvin for a second, because it's everyone's favorite topic, right? But Jonathan Garvin, for me, if you've paid attention or if you care about my grades in any way, shape, or form, Jonathan Garvin was my lowest graded Packer a season ago. And it's not the be-all end-all. I will tell you that all the time. It's not like it's canon. It's not like I have access to the Packers, grades. And I'm like, all right, Jonathan Garvin's the worst player on the team. But by my grading system, which has identified the players that they've gotten rid of far more often than not, Jonathan Garvin was my lowest graded player from a season ago. And then when you add that to the fact that he didn't show up to OTAs and minicamps, now full transparency here, he could have had an amazing, immaculate, pristine reason for not being at OTAs and minicamps. But when you struggled in your second season and then you don't show up to the non-mandatory portions of OTAs and minicamps, and then you had a little bit of a slow start to camp, I'll be totally honest, I had written Jonathan Garvin off to the point where if you'd told me at the beginning of camp that Jonathan Garvin was one of the first 5 cuts, which is coming next week already, by the way. Next Tuesday is the deadline for that, I believe. But when they go from 90 to 85, if you would have told me at the beginning of training camp that Jonathan Garvin was in that group, I would have been like, yeah, I could totally see that and understand that. Now, how he has played over the last handful of days, he has really played great football. Now, if your follow-up question to that is, all right, Andy, like Jonathan Garvin really struggled a season ago. We saw Ladarius Hamilton almost dominate yesterday. We saw Jonathan Garvin have a huge day today. Like, is that good for Hamilton and Garvin, or is that super concerning for the offensive tackles? The answer is yes. I do think Ladarius Hamilton and Jonathan Garvin have put together 2 good days of practice these past couple days. But I have very serious concerns over Yash and Royce and Cole Van Lannon and Zach Tom at times and anyone else that's been out at offensive tackle with the starters. That has been a major concern. And even guys like Tipa has had a few practices where he's looked really good. Ladarius Hamilton has, and now Jonathan Garvin these past few days have been really impressive. And that is concerning for an offensive line. If those guys, no offense, are giving you problems from an offensive line standpoint, I mean, what are you going to do when you're facing the best of the best? And I know they are not playing Von Miller or Khalil Mack this season, but they do play Miller, right? They do play, but yeah, they play Buffalo. So Von Miller, what are they going to do when they're facing the Von Millers of the world, right? That is going to be a level of concern if those are the guys that are out there. So kudos to Jonathan Garvin, who had a very good day of practice. He had a pressure, he had a sack, he had a would-be sack. He had one play where actually 2 back-to-back plays where he aggressively set the edge and funneled everything back inside. It was a dominant performance by those 4 players. And what I loved is when you had these players aggressively setting the edge, who were you funneling them inside to? TJ Slayton was eating souls on the inside of the defensive line today. Like if a running back came in his, I don't know if I'm like aging myself here, but if you remember Kirby, the video game where he just like sucked everything, that was TJ Slayton. He was just a big black hole in the middle of the defensive line. If you were anything near TJ Slayton, he was just sucking you into a black hole, and that was the end of you. And then the same could be said for Jack Heflin, who had a very nice day of practice. Kenny Clark, Jerron Reed, those guys were just eating inside because everything was funneled in, and those guys gained the advantage because of the hard work that players like Garvin and Gary and Preston were doing on the outside by setting a hard physical edge and funneling everything back inside. And that he doesn't even get to the fact that if for some reason, you get to the edge, now the edge is set, and so you funnel it back inside, and let's just say you get by Slayton or Reed or Kenny Clark, etc., etc. There are 2 physical, fast linebackers in Devondre Campbell and Quay Walker waiting for you. This front has been so fun to watch. I can't wait. And again, it doesn't perfectly calculate always to how things will go in the regular season. There's a long way to go on the season, but I could not be more excited with how this defensive front is playing. And then they've got 3 tremendous corners on the back end. Like it is a very exciting time to be a fan of defensive football in Green Bay. There will be hiccups. There will be learning points, of course, across the season, but this is a fast defense that's going to make the offense earn a lot. By example, and I know it's Jordan Love and not Aaron Rodgers, but there's a couple plays, like just run plays to start practice, nondescript. And then here were the next 4 plays. Eric Stokes intercepts a Jordan Love pass that deflected off Sammy Watkins' fingertips. To me, it was a poor throw. It was more on Love than it was on Watkins. Rashawn Gary then had a sack. Preston Smith had a tackle for loss about 4 to 5 yards in the backfield. And then it was another probable sack for Preston Smith right after that. Those were 4 consecutive plays for the defense. Pick, sack, 4-yard loss on a run, sack. That's the way the defense is playing right now. And yes, Jordan Love at quarterback, not Aaron Rodgers, but it hasn't been that much different even when Aaron Rodgers has been in there. That's how impressive this defense has been, and it continued into Tuesday. Not all terrible for the offense. And wouldn't you know, the play of the day for the offense again was Romeo Doubs. And Jordan Love, kudos to him on this too. He has perfected so far in this training camp the back corner end zone throw. He has hit at least 4 or 5 of these throws in the back corner of the end zone, where it's just in the very corner, right where his receiver can get it, drops it into a bucket, and gives them the opportunity to go get the ball and make the play. And it's been Romeo Doubs a couple times coming down with this. On this play, Doubs beat Rasul Douglas clean on the route, had a yard and a half of separation, goes to the corner of the end zone, ball's right there, placed in a perfect spot. Douglas had no chance. Beautiful play by Romeo Doubs to get open on the play. Even better throw by Jordan Love to just drop it in there. Like I said, he has that's one thing that you can tell he has worked on, and he has really perfected that throw in the back corner of the end zone. Now, like I said, he's thrown it over and over. In fact, he had another one to Tyler Davis in another red zone period that he threw a good ball on too. Adrian Amos was just there to make things difficult for Tyler Davis, but it was another really good throw and gave Davis an opportunity to come up with the ball. Just better coverage by Adrian Adrian Amos on the play. So biggest play of the day on offense, no doubt. And just like it's day after day, right? Romeo Doubs comes up with the biggest play once again. Let's go over some logistics really quick. Randy Ramsey was out again with an ankle. Again, it seems to be this recurring ankle injury for Ramsey. So that is frustrating for him. Hopefully he's back 100% sooner rather than later. Dante Vaughn was also out with a hamstring injury. Wordle was back in at long snapper. He had limped off on practice on Monday. So crisis averted there. Steven Wordle is back and had seemingly no injury issue on Tuesday. Ty Summers returned from illness. Your full did not practice list included Aaron Rodgers, Randy Ramsey, Dante Vaughn, Innis Gaines, Darnell Savage, David Bakhtiari, Osiris Mitchell, Christian Watson, Elton Jenkins, Kylan Hill, Robert Tonyan, Cole Schneider, and Mason Crosby. Fun Mason Crosby moment. They were practicing outside with a soccer ball, him and the trainer just kicking it back and forth, doing some light kicking. The biggest takeaway there is it was a really sweet Packers soccer ball that I have to look on Packers Pro Shop to see if they actually sell that thing, because that was a sweet looking Packers soccer ball. Neither here nor there, but a fun little aside. All right, starting offensive line for the day. Matt LaFleur mentioned in his pre-practice press conference that they are far from knowing the ultimate offensive line, and part of that might be due to David Bakhtiari and if and when he's going to come back. Another is I just don't think that they've settled on anything. But for I think at least 2 or 3 consecutive days now, it has been Yash at left tackle, John Runyon Jr. at left guard, Josh Myers at center, Jake Hansen at right guard, and Royce Newman at right tackle. That was the same lineup that they had on Tuesday. Zach Tom got some time in there at right tackle as well, but it seems to be right now that they're, I don't want to say leaning because it's way too early for that, but that has been the lineup they've been going with more often than not lately is Yash, John Runyon Jr., Myers, Hansen, and Newman. Other logistics here, Sean Davis actually got some of the reps with the ones at safety instead of Vernon Scott. So since Darnell Savage has went down, it's been Vernon Scott that's been occupying that spot. On Tuesday, Sean Davis got some of those reps. Another player that I just wanted to discuss for some of his performance was Keyshawn Nixon. Nixon had a couple plays. First, he showed off his special teams chops. He was a gunner on special teams. I don't know who he was going against, but he completely got right around him and got right in the face of the punt returner. And you can just tell he brings a passion and an intensity to special teams. He cares about it. He's dedicated to it. And I think it's going to do wonders for the Packers special teams, just having a guy like that. If I say Jarrett Bush, that puts a couple things in people's mind. Like they think all of a sudden, I think bad corner, and I think they think like special teams demon. Like I don't know that Keyshawn Nixon's going to be like one of your top special teams guys in the league, but he's bought in, he cares about it, and he showed off some of those special teams chops on Tuesday. The other thing is I love his intensity on defense as well, and it's just been a couple days of team drills for Nixon, but he had 2 plays back to back. The first was against Ishmael Hyman, the second was against Samori Toure, where he's physically jamming them and just locks them up at the line of scrimmage. By the time Hyman or Toure even remotely got into their routes, the play was over, and Nixon had them basically in the upside down with what he did to them at the line of scrimmage. So love the confidence from Nixon, love the communication, love the intensity. I think, again, when I say I think they found something there, I'm not saying like this is going to be a good starter, right? But you have to realize, like, if you get a player like that at a vet minimum salary with, I think, either little to no guarantees on the deal, and you find that player and he can be a number 4 corner for you and have a special teams value and have potentially some slot defense value as well, like that is a potential huge find. Even if he's not like this star player. If he can be like a Chandon Sullivan on defense as your number 4, if he can be that level of player, plus have some good special teams ability, that is a heck of a find for a vet minimum deal for Brian Gutekunst. I hate saying this, I hate bringing it up, but long snapping continued to be an issue. Both Wordle and Coco continue to struggle with snaps that go awry. So the Packers worked out some long snappers. We'll get to that in just a little bit, but that continues to remain a problem for the special teams. One of the more fun or interesting plays of the day, well, they were going through these plays. They started at the 4-yard line, then they went to the 9, and then they went to like the 15, and then the 25, and then like the 35. And basically the offense had one play to get into the end zone from all of these different spots. And then I think from the 4, I think might have been the play where they tried to hit Tyler Davis in the end zone and Amos knocked it away. And then on the 9, they hit Aaron Jones in the middle of the field for a touchdown. But I think on the one from like the 25, it was right around there. they have Jerron Reed, and then I think they had 2 outside linebackers standing up, and then I think it was probably a couple linebackers, and then the rest were defensive backs with a majority of them back towards the end zone, right? They go one-man rush on the play. Jerron Reed's the only guy rushing. And when I say Jerron Reed was rushing, he was, this was just like sort of making sure Jordan Love didn't try to like take off in the pocket. He was basically spying. So you could argue they went with a 0-man pressure because it was only Jerron Reed. Everyone else dropped back into coverage, and Reed was just sort of going back and forth and just sort of spying the quarterback. And understandably, right? Because if he tries to go and rush the quarterback, he's going to have 5 offensive linemen that are just going to try to like pound him into oblivion, right? So might as well just try to spy the quarterback at that point. I guess at that point, you might as well almost just like put 11 in coverage, but it worked. There was nowhere for Jordan Love to throw the ball. And like I said, it worked. It was an incomplete pass, and the defense held up on their side. But interesting to see. I know there will be rants on Twitter when Green Bay goes with a 3-man rush. Well, I am dying to see what happens on Twitter when Green Bay goes with a 1-man rush. All right, couple things that weren't directly involved with practice. Aaron Rodgers was interviewed after practice and was asked about and was talking about the wide receivers. And at the end of his quote, he said, quote, "I will say between numbers 88 and 87, there's been a lot of positive things that make you feel good about the depth we could have in that wide receiver room. 88, Juwann Winfree, 87, Romeo Doubs." Romeo Doubs being included in that, not shocking based on what he's done. Juwann Winfree getting the shout out there is the big noteworthy item. And Zach Cruz brought up on Twitter, like, do you almost have to keep Juwann Winfree just based on that comment? Because you don't want another, Jake Kumaro situation where Rodgers goes and compliments the wide receiver and then you go and cut said wide receiver, or, right? So like, it definitely puts up like that not a red flag, but like bells and whistles start going off of like, okay, like Rodgers is like, that was a big compliment for Juwann Winfree, who, it should be noted, has a lot of reps, and I mean a lot of reps with the ones so far. But then you start doing some wide receiver math really quick, right? And you were sort of thinking, all right, Lazard, Watkins, Cobb, and then Christian Watson if he gets back in time, Romeo Doubs, Amari Rodgers, that's 6. Maybe they keep 7. And if you keep 7, that's probably between Winfree, Toure, maybe Malik Taylor, but Malik Taylor just hasn't, probably done enough to get in that conversation right now. So even if you keep 7 in that situation and you keep Juwann Winfree, then Toure is out, who has had some plays that at least make you think like, do you want to put him in, waivers or put him on the practice squad where he could sign with any team at any time? There could just be like an inkling to want to keep him in that situation. I definitely don't think you can keep 8 wide receivers, although they've kept 5 tight ends in the past, so nothing would shock me all that much. But you start doing some very quick wide receiver math, and if Winfree all of a sudden gets into this, lock conversation where you're not cutting Juwann Winfree, and if Rodgers feels that way about him, that changes things. Now, if Christian Watson starts in the PUP list, that could ease that burden a little bit. But I think the other thing that we need to start talking about, and this I tweeted this out, Aaron Nagler and I were talking on the sidelines. Sammy Watkins has had an incredibly slow start to camp. He started injured. He came back. He had a couple catches at family night. One was a pretty decent push off. Hasn't really done anything outside of that. No explosives. No big run after the catches, which is not what he's known for much anymore. There hasn't been much there. Now, you're going against the Rasul Douglases and the Jair Alexanders and the Eric Stokes of the world, but Romeo Doubs has easily outperformed him. So the question starts becoming, if you would have asked me when they signed Sammy Watkins, if you would have asked me right then and there, is Sammy Watkins a lock to make the team? I would have said, based on his contract, no way. Like, that is a very cuttable contract, and he's going to have to go and earn his spot. And if all of the other, like if Watson and Doubs, like Cobb is, can't go anywhere, right? He's Rodgers' best friend. Like, that's the reason Rodgers came back to Green Bay. So you can't do anything with Cobb. Lazard's not going anywhere. Based on Goody's comments towards Amari Rodgers, I would be shocked. He's just a 3rd-round pick a year ago, and he's shown some signs lately too. I can't imagine he's going anywhere. We know Watson and Doubs aren't going anywhere. Like, that's 5. And then if you want to keep Juwann Winfree, that's 6. And then if it's Toure, that's 7. Is Sammy Watkins the odd man out? And like I said, I would have said going into the season, if Watkins doesn't look good, like he's going to have to earn that contract. And then at the very beginning of training camp, this big red herring, at least maybe it's a red herring, but like the thing that threw me off the scent is Matt LaFleur said that, quote, I'm not going to quote it exactly, I'm paraphrasing here, but said that Sammy Watkins was going to have a major role within the Packers offense. And Aaron Rodgers was talking very much about Watkins and what he was going to bring to the offense. So when you had Rodgers talking about Watkins and when you had Matt LaFleur, like Matt LaFleur could have easily said the you know what, we're still evaluating everything and everyone's going to have to compete for snaps, which he says, just the normal coach speak, right? Of like, everyone's got to earn their snaps. He could have easily said that when asked about Sammy Watkins, but he would not. Like he said, he's going to have a huge role or a big role, huge role, something like that in their offense. Now, things can change. And if he's not performing or doesn't look like himself, that can change in a moment's notice. But that's what like gave me the feel at the beginning of camp of like, okay, well, we can stop talking about Sammy Watkins getting released, because if he's going to have a big role in the offense, he's clearly not going anywhere. But I think the reason that this is worth discussing here is because Sammy Watkins has been off to a very slow start, and he had the injuries again to start training camp. He doesn't look fast right now. He doesn't look like he's maybe he's just not in like peak football condition yet, and maybe it takes him through training camp to get to that point. I don't know, but he's not just like beating people off the line. That's not who he is right now. And you combine that with the fact that he has a contract where you can save money on. Now, he's at a $1.77 million deal. If you release him, you get $350K in dead cap, which means you would save $1.4 million basically. But let's say you keep Juwann Winfree instead of Sammy Watkins. Juwann Winfree makes $895K. So you take the 1.4 savings from Watkins and you subtract basically the $900K. You have a net savings of $527,000 and a little bit of change after that. But so it's not like you're looking at this and being like, all right, we got to save $500,000. We got to cut Sammy Watkins. I don't think the cost savings is that much where like, if it's close, if everything's equal, if the decision is like, well, we like Juwann Winfree, we like Sammy Watkins, but we can't really, decide between the two. Well, in that case, like keep the guy that doesn't cost you $500,000 additional dollars, right? That's Juwann Winfree. But if you like Watkins better and, you want to keep him, you're not too concerned over $500,000 in extra money, but there is a cost savings involved if you do want to cut Watkins. And more importantly, I think the thing that's really worth remembering here is that any veteran that is on the roster for week 1 has a guaranteed contract for the entirety of the season. So Sammy Watkins would go from having $350K in guaranteed money to the full $1.77 million guaranteed if he's on the roster on week 1. I do think there is a world in which maybe Green Bay would say, hey, we're going to bring you back in week 2. We are going to release you at the 53-man cutdown. We want to keep some of these young guys on our roster to make sure that they can't get claimed. We're not going to play you week 1 because we're not going to guarantee your contract. And we're going to bring you back week 2 if you would like to still come back with the team. And then we'll kind of go week by week after that. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. Now, you risk potentially losing Sammy Watkins. I don't think that's a huge risk because he hasn't shown that much in training camp. But that is one way that they can go. And that is something that happens with veterans that have that type of deal every single year in the NFL. There will be some veteran this year that gets cut prior to week 1 and then picked back up week 2 so that the team doesn't have to guarantee their roster. And then likely he comes back at more of a vet minimum deal and Green Bay gets some cost savings there anyway. And if he goes somewhere else, he goes somewhere else. And if he doesn't want to play in Green Bay after that, then he doesn't play in Green Bay. That's all within the realm of possibility. But that is one direction that they could go in and say, hey, we're releasing you. We're not going to have you on the roster for week 1. If you're still available and interested, we're going to bring you back week 2 and not guarantee your deal. That's a possibility. You have to know that by doing that, you could lose the player. But if you've already gotten to that point, like I don't think that would be a major concern. So I'm not there yet. If you were to ask me today, if I had to put money on it, is Sammy Watkins on the roster week 1? I would bet yes today. But I do think his lack of productivity in camp so far, his lack of explosiveness, his lack of playmaking, and his contract and the guaranteed week one because he's a veteran. I think all those things together just have me thinking a little bit of like, I'm not on board anymore with like, all right, he's locked to make the roster. And especially with Rodgers mentioning Juwan Winfrey, especially with how Romeo Doubs has performed, with Brian Gutekunst going on and on about being bullish on Amari Rodgers and that he seems to at least be taking a little bit of a step in camp this year. Like, you just start doing some of the math and you're like, I don't know how you can just say like, yep, Watkins has a spot, and it's set in stone. Leaning there today that he probably is on the roster, but I'm much closer to 50-50 now than I have been since really he signed the deal originally. All right, couple other things. I posted this on Twitter as well. I'm not going to spend too much time here, but like I posted, how many players on the Packers offense right now would you say are in the prime of their career? And I said 4, and I'd be interested, you can comment below. But I think Allen Lazard is in his prime right now. I think Elgton Jenkins, like if he wasn't returning from injury, would be like, he's already probably in like the prime of his career. You could argue that his best year, especially since he is coming off of injury, would probably be next year, the year after, maybe even the year after that. So you could argue that Elgton Jenkins isn't even there yet and that he's still improving. I wouldn't argue against that. Robert Tonyan, I think, despite injury, this would be like the prime of his career, right? And then there's 3 other ones that I think you could argue. Josh Neyman, you could argue, is like at least at the point of his career where like he's entering the prime of his career. What the prime of Josh Neyman's career is, who knows? But you could argue Josh maybe is getting into the prime of his career. I would say that he is still a developmental player and isn't quite there yet. So I would not say him. And then you have the 2 running backs, Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon. On running back math, or like in NFL math, Aaron Jones is 27 years old. You would say he's the prime of his career. And Dillon is still like, 23, 24? I didn't look it up. But like still very young, you would say. In NFL terms, he's not in the prime of his career yet. In running back math, I would say, Aaron Jones is past the prime of a running back. Like a prime running back in the NFL right now is like 22, 23, 24. Like that's when you're in your prime, when your legs are the freshest. I would say AJ Dillon is in the prime running back years. So I would make the argument 4 Packers on offense are in the prime of their career. Lazard, maybe Elgton Jenkins, Tonyan, and Dillon. The other one that's an interesting conversation is Aaron Rodgers. And Perry Goldstein messaged me and she said, I think Aaron Rodgers might be in the second prime of his career. And I like that. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I would still say it's tough for me to say anyone that's, 39-ish years of age is in the prime of their career. I think that's a little tough for me to swallow. But if you want to say he's like in the second prime of his career, I could get behind that. He just won back-to-back MVPs, right? And maybe just if you're Aaron Rodgers, maybe you're always in your prime. You could argue that too. So maybe there, but like I don't even know what point I'm trying to make here, but just an interesting of like, you've got this huge group of developmental players on the roster. And then you've got your Rodgers, who's age 39. You've got, Aaron Jones, who is getting up there in age for a running back. Your Mercedes Lewis, your Sammy Watkins. Like you've got this other group of players, David Bakhtiari, who are in the older age group, right? There are very few that are in that like sweet middle spot in the exact prime of their careers. Whether that's good, bad, ugly, indifferent, who the heck knows? But it just was interesting to me nonetheless of like not a ton of Packers that are exactly in the prime of their careers on offense. Last but not least, before I get out of here, Green Bay did work out a variety of different players. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because if they sign somebody, we'll talk about them a little bit more. They tried out 3 punters, and I'm going to butcher some of these names. I apologize in advance, but Simon Lareya, Will Spires, and Bailey Flint. So 3 punters. 3 kickers, Austin McGinnis, Ramiz Ahmed, and Aldrick Rojas. 2 long snappers, Antonio Ortiz and Mitchell Fraboni. A bunch of running backs, Dexter Williams, Jalen Samuels, Kalen Ballage, and Stevie Scott. I've seen Kelvin Turner listed as a running back and a wide receiver, so he plays one of those positions. 2 offensive linemen, Aaron Survey and Drew Heimelman. A linebacker in Brendan White, and a safety in Micah Abernathy. So a variety of players that they tried out. I would think that the punters are your, break glass in case of emergency. Sort of they're trying to set their list for the season where if O'Donnell gets hurt and they need to pick somebody up, they've got the guy that they want in mind. The kickers, I think, very well could be in play. Burkich has not been impressive. He's been very inconsistent. So if Mason Crosby's not ready, I don't know that they can go into the season week 1 with Burkich. So that's worth monitoring. And then long snapper's been maybe not a nightmare, but it's been ugly. So Ortiz and Fraboni could easily, maybe get in that competition if they were all of a sudden signed. So running back, I think that the clear and obvious reason for all the running backs is you've got Patrick Taylor, who's a bit banged up right now. Dillon and Jones are not going to play in the preseason game week 1. So you would think that would leave only Goodson and BJ Baylor for the week 1 preseason game, and you don't want to go into a preseason game with just 2 running backs. So you would think if Patrick Taylor is not going to be able to go, that they will add one of those running backs prior to this week's preseason game. They'd have to make a corresponding move, but if and when that happens, we will of course keep you posted and review any moves that the Packers make right here on the Pack-A-Day podcast. If you have not subscribed already, please make sure to do so. As mentioned at the onset, I appreciate you so much for joining me. I love doing this. I love talking Packers. I hope you're enjoying it. Make sure to like, subscribe, all the rest. You get it. I will see you tomorrow with an all-new episode. But until next time, and as always, go Pack-O.